just kind of the conversation. But
okay,
how did the move go?
Cool. Move is great. I have a dope new setup, but that whole week was crazy.
So you had you were telling me you just set up. Tell me about the DNS thing that you just set up.
Yeah. So one other person and myself set up the first cloud native DNS server for .mil domains. So typically everything that you go to that's a military website, it ends in .mil, which is the top level domain. That's all controlled by DISA.
That's the Defense Intelligence
Security Agency. And those guys, they have a tight hold on just about everything communications. So everything from like hardwired phone networks to domains, they control very tightly. So it was a battle both in architecting a cloud solution, but it was also a battle in people to really get the things we needed to deploy this to the cloud.
What kind of obstacles would you face in that circumstance?
So one of the hardest things, we needed our DNS server to talk to the DISA root servers, so that it, like when DNS, when you go and query something .mil, it goes to the .mil root servers hosted on DISA networks to be like, oh, where does this domain live? So we needed a trusted IP space.
Right. So they need to, that when you're querying or when you have, something outside of their network, they need to know who's asking and that, they can share information back and forth. So it's like whitelisting.
Right. Yeah. They have we had a whitelisted block of IP addresses that we had to get into the cloud, so that we could assign our name servers a trusted IP address. And we probably spent both between talking to DISA and talking to AWS, 2 weeks of just consistent banging, against the door. Finally, we were able to get AWS to bypass their requirement for RPKI, which is the way they verify cryptographically an IP source. We just got a letter of authorization for them to port those IP addresses. So that was probably the biggest hurdle.
Now, RPKI, I haven't had a chance to work with it much, but is that sort of like a private set?
Neither have I. No, I'm no RPKI expert. So what I know about it, though, is that basically, are you familiar with Aaron or Aaron? Yeah. So the way that RPKI would work in this instance is we would have a self-signed X509 certificate, which we would then, assuming we're the owners of this IP space, go to our Aaron who is, and we would publish the public certificate there. And then we would digitally sign with our private certificate a message that when we called the AWS API would be able to be verified that the block of IPs we were telling AWS to port in had this public message, to verify our ownership.
Right. It sounds a lot like MTLS. So you have, when I was working with Skype for Business, when it was Link, remember learning that they have certificates that you can then have a third-party verification to determine, okay, this is how these guys communicate. Rather than having to use credentials, you'd be able to say, okay, this certificate is valid, this server for this client, and then everyone can communicate.
Right. Now, like for a normal, well, I don't know how many normal people own big chunks of public
I
IPs.
think based on just if you own big chunks of IP, you're not normal.
Right, right. There's something going on. So DISA owns those IPs. And, to be clear, me being within like doing this on behalf of the Air Force, we're not DISA. So it was this interagency communication to try and find the guy who actually can do that with Aaron, and we never found this guy. So the letter of authorization was kind of the bypass around that. And it really boiled down to just telling AWS, look, like we need this done. We had a lot of help from, the office of the Secretary of the Air Force to kind of push this through AWS. So yeah, it was a tremendous effort. And
what's the benefit now that we have that exists? What's the improvement?
So the biggest improvement is centralized management. So I work for my company contracts with Platform One, which is a DevSecOps initiative within the Air Force. And a lot of our domains are hosted both on a IO domain, so dsop.io, and on cdl.af.mil. And so there's this distributed management of DNS, which isn't ideal if you want to make one entry to potentially have to like put in a ticket and wait on an A record, or if something goes down because the DNS server where it's hosted is behind a network that makes it difficult to talk to the public internet. So to be able to manage all of our DNS in one place and have the architecture be cloud native and distributed among AWS availability zones, which gives it sort of a resiliency. That's where the benefit comes. Now we can do everything from create a mail server like within a couple hours versus trying to get that through a bureaucratic process.
Yeah, some of those bureaucratic processes can be they could be nightmares. It's always interesting to see when things get done quickly, like what level of emergency can actually make people move quickly and see stuff actually get taken down.
Yeah, and another thing is like imagine so SSL certificates for all these different domains became kind of a nightmare because the SSL certificate for dev.dsop.io may be expiring before chat.dsop.io, and so there was never a consistent way to rotate our SSL certificates. So certificate management, centralized zone management, and an ability to bring on more .mil domains to do the same.
So you guys would be you'd have your own root CAs to be able to issue this way.
Well, actually, that's the next task. That's the next task that kind of I'm thinking about, but that is not in place yet.
I actually got an opportunity to work with a company that was Komodo before, or when I was at my last job, and we bought their management tools, and now they were a little expensive. I mean, definitely prohibitive for an individual, but they had some cool tools that no one else had, like being able to automatically reissue certificates based with like an agent. So you'd install like a Windows agent, for scanning the domain. You could scan all your Active Directory objects and figure out, okay, these are all the different things I have. These are all the device certs, all the user certs. And then you'd have like web-based IIS certs and things that could be rotated automatically. So the reissue request would go into the agent, and it would reissue it and install it, and the web server wouldn't even go down. That was a lot of a big improvement.
Yeah, and we're about to be there at Platform One with we're looking at HashiCorp Vault. They do some very cool things with PKI, and so I'm beginning to have that thought process and the conversation with the right people to automate a lot of that type of work.
Yeah, so, that administrative stuff that can totally screw your org when you mess it up, and all you have to do is stay really, really hyper organized on really boring stuff. And that's my downfall usually in life is, hyper management of, making sure I don't run out of laundry detergent or dishwasher soap.
Exactly. It's like it's something no one wants to think about, but is so integral to continuously functioning smoothly.
Yep.
Yep. And so there are a lot of little problems like that within the DoD that are starting to really be looked at, broken down, automated, and really re-implemented properly. So it's both challenging, but it's also really cool to figure out. So DNS was kind of the small little victory, simply because it had never been done before for .mil domains.
Well, that's something you should feel pretty proud of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me say congrats. I'm impressed. I know what it's like to work within the DoD and getting stuff done, and to actually get something done in a reasonable amount of time is no small feat, especially during a pandemic and with everything else going on. To stay that focused and actually get things done when you're completely at the mercy of everyone else answering their phone or answering their email. Kudos, man.
It's so funny because this whole initiative for DNS was the idea of the CSO of the Air Force. And, he and I were joking about the DNS thing, and he was joking that it was taking too long. Basically, it was like, oh yeah, it's taken 4 months to get a DNS server up. And, the funniest part of that is like, to get a DNS server up is nothing. It's the craziness and the bureaucracy to actually get it up. Which is what takes the most time.
It's interesting. Like what can be accomplished technologically isn't the hard part. It like building an Exchange server, you can build a network from scratch, and like you find, like I remember thinking that stuff was really, really crazy hard, or like, oh, I don't know how to build an Exchange server. And if I were to sit down on my laptop now, I've got 64 gigs of RAM on this one over here. I could go and build a functioning enterprise level network with redundant domain controllers and multiple Exchange servers and have it all running in just, in an afternoon. And then it follow all the instructions, get it all done, and just sitting there running. But getting permission and then explaining right. it to people who are in charge yet don't always have the requisite sort of knowledge to understand everything, and then how it works with everything else, and then documenting it, keeping track of all the that's the hard part.
Oh yeah, documenting is actually my weakness.
It's a lot of people's weaknesses.
I always I like to be like, well, the code is the documentation, but that doesn't really fly with everyone.
We definitely use that analogy in the Air Force. It doesn't fly. It's, but yeah, no, it doesn't. Like you got to put together the Visio and got to get it all, laid out nice. And it's like by then you've got another fire to deal with. If you didn't have a whole bunch of other projects sort of knocking down your door, it'd be, oh yeah, I'll just take a day and I'll spend documenting and have some coffee and but we're never really given that.
Right.
It's just not enough of us.
No.
Would you?
I still,
go ahead.
I still think I wouldn't be able to. I still think I would struggle with just sitting down and writing it. So I have to leverage, the talents of kind of a team to build out the skeleton so that I can go in and fill in the gaps.
Would you see yourself working where you're working 5 years ago or like 10 years ago?
No, absolutely.
What would you
not.
have thought? What would you have thought of yourself 10 years ago if you had said this is what you were doing?
I would have probably scoffed. I never. First off, I had no idea that what I was inherently good at was valuable, even to typical industry. So then to put that into the context of the government and working on mission critical systems, I would have laughed, and I also would have said, I'm not going to work for the government. Like, F that. That was kind of my modus operandi, was very much rebellious and tunnel visioned and on what I thought was important. So my understanding of where I'm at now and what I get to do now for whom I get to do it, never in a million years would I have been able to predict that.
What is it that you're inherently good at?
That's a good question. I am able, I guess, I never like this type of self-analysis, but there is really no problem that I don't feel I can solve if I just put my mind to, taking it piece by piece and solving it. So I've never set up a DNS server, for instance, before.
I think you probably aren't being as generous to yourself as you might be other people. I think that happens with a lot of people. Like, looking at your resume, it definitely shows ability to learn new things, and there's handfuls of stuff on there that I don't even know what. It's a brand new language or it's a brand new type of technology, and you're like, yeah, I just did this over the weekend. Sweet. That's super valuable.
Yeah. I have an ability to, for whatever reason, right? In the context of technology, rapidly onboard, conceptual information and put it into practice. And it served me, really well. I think that a lot of people have the ability to do the same if the focus is applied. I think that if people, harness their innate, inherent focus, it just depends on what they want to focus on.
And it definitely comes down to
I've spent a lot of my time.
To like goal setting. Like, if you don't have any typical goal, like I don't have any reason to learn this piece of tech because I haven't seen the value in it. Why would you just pick up a book when you could sit and watch TV and binge watch a show? But if you're like, I have to solve this for this work problem, that's definitely one of the things that goes through me every day is like, how am I going to stay useful? And like, how am I going to be useful to my job and like stay relevant? And like, okay, they need this solved. Like, it's on me. What if it's in English? Even if it isn't, we've got translate.google.com. Like, there's ways to solve these problems, even if you don't even speak the language, because everything, it just comes down to like whether you're learning C++ or C# or some new thing, you have to learn something to get there. There's a lot of prerequisites.
Yeah. What's interesting is like, I'm terrible ADD. And when I first installed Linux, I would do things really, really quickly without really thinking about it. I never read the manual before doing it. And so I created a ton of problems that I needed to fix in order for just my system to work.
I know
And
exactly
so
what you're talking about. Like moving through the GUI installer so fast you didn't read it. Because you
exactly,
can't, it hurts to go slow.
Yeah, it does. I'm like, okay, yeah, partition it this way or whatever. And then come to find out, like, I installed Linux, 6 times in 6 hours. And during that time, I learned quite a bit about, partitions and, memory allocations and a lot of different things I never would have learned had I not gone and broken it to then have to come to an understanding of why I need.
My life is the same way. So, it's like that scene in Toy Story where they're looking for the commercial with the chicken on Toy Story 2, and he's on the remote and he's going like trying to go through the remote really fast. He's like, there it is, and he's like, too late, I already passed it. It's faster to go around the horn. Like, that's me. Like, I can't stop going in the direction at full speed, excited. But if I can't run on that excitement, if I'm not running at 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs, I'm at zero. Like, I can't muster to go slow.
Yep. That's very much. And I do that all the time. I still do. And I think it's a strength.
It can be.
I think that if I can maintain awareness of where and why I'm going very quickly, and be like I've come to learn the implications of doing that in certain aspects of life to where it can cause consequences that I didn't intend. You know what I mean?
If you could sum up my entire life, it would be unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah. I mean, mine too. I mean, so to answer your question initially, 5 years ago, would you have imagined yourself working for the government? No, but going at the rate in which I move, sometimes, yeah, I guess it makes sense to me now.
It's definitely I have 2 kids, not because they were planned, but more because it was like a Bob Ross painting. Happy little accidents. And I love them to death, but no one would suggest doing things in a way that would get me more of them. Like,
that's my favorite Bob Rossism is
just a happy little accident.
A happy little accident. A happy little tree. Yeah.
It definitely. I've made a lot of mistakes, which is how I end up learning what not to do. And even when it comes to relationships or everything in life, but especially in tech, you get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, this is that point in the game when if you choose the wrong thing, you have to start over from scratch because you built your character in the wrong way. No, you can't pick this type of thing for this Exchange server,
And like you can't read that type of insight in a book. Or you can't gain it in a class. I mean, you really have to obtain that type of insight from making.
And that's where it comes down to those sayings like fail fast, fail often, fail forward.
Yep. Yeah. Fail fast and continual process improvement are the 2 things I live by. So, yeah, that I guess, yeah, that little tangent right there. I would say that is, that's what I do well. Is make mistakes and then learn.
Yeah, if I could tell myself or anyone anything, it would be none of the people you look up to inherently have anything that much different than you. So, like, look at the difference genetically between chimpanzees and humans. It's like a less than 1% difference. And that 1% is pretty significant because I don't see that many chimpanzees riding the bus. Or
or I mean, the saying of like, I would stick 1,000, monkeys
to type Shakespeare, right?
Hanging around the type. Yeah, exactly. Well, it takes 1,000 monkeys where it was only one Shakespeare. So.
And what's the difference genetically between us and Elon Musk? And then what do those people have to give up? I mean, I had a kid and then got married, and then as we were splitting up, got pregnant again. So like had a kid, then a marriage, then a divorce, and then a kid again. It's not the way traditionally to do that. It's not advisable. But Elon Musk has been divorced and married to the same woman twice. That wasn't the plan. But people make mistakes. We don't always advertise our failures. But the guy keeps getting up and trying stuff. And even when faced with setbacks or disappointments, like watch him being interviewed about SpaceX and the reaction of like I think Buzz Aldrin talking about
was it Neil?
Yeah, it was. But yeah, they were not supportive of him, and it like you could tell it broke his heart.
It did. I think he started crying, But today he is launching 4 astronauts into space to go to the International Space Station. For
in
NASA.
Style, like the inside of the cockpits of these Dragon containers, they like look like an Apple product. It's so pretty. Yeah, it's what you'd think of like with beautiful. Space travel and like Isaac Asimov or oh my god, it's so cool.
Or Ridley Scott,
yeah, so cool.
Something. Yeah, way cool. And yeah, I have failed so many times, and it's like. What are the options other than to try again?
Giving up sucks, and like especially with the pandemic and like having ADHD is not ideal, and I wouldn't pick it. But being an introvert or being an extrovert who's used to being on the computer and being away from people gives us a superpower during times like pandemic. We're about ready to go into another lockdown. How are you going to cope? Yep. With not being able to see people? And there's a lot of us, especially in our industry, who are like, cope. This is Kobe, this is my desired state of being. This is how I choose to live.
I'm normal now. Yeah.
The world is conformed to me.
That's so funny. I mean, because verbatim I've had that thought. And yeah, I mean, like my preferred way of being is to be on my computer and learning something new or trying something new, which doesn't lend itself well to socializing, other than digitally. So
like being part of, I always encourage people to try and find a community to be a part of, whether it's a subreddit or, an IRC group or Slack channel. Like, and it gets to the point where now I'm on like 5 different Slack channels, and 2 of them aren't even company related. It's just, DEF CON people, this, that, and the other. But you find those groups of people who are much more dedicated than my real life human friends in person,
Yeah. IRC is actually like the communities and IRC, those were the places I started to get my understanding of basically how to aim my curiosity, and still are. IRC, Slack. I'm in the cloud native Slack, and then all my work communication is done in Mattermost. So it's such a natural thing to me to work remotely and to be connected to people in not a traditional way that when I hear like another lockdown, I cannot understand why people get so enraged or so like, bothered by it. I guess that when I empathize with normal people, then yeah, but
it isn't the worst. It's not the worst. It's not a punishment, and it's not the worst thing in the world. And I mean, I think Germany just decided or declared the heroes of the pandemic to be the couch potatoes. I just think it's hilarious. Like, it's true.
That's yeah.
So what I guess what could
going out and spreading it.
People who don't do what we do, or people who might end up watching this podcast, I guess how does the time pass quickly for us versus normal people? What are we doing? Like, I decided to create this podcast. I'm going to be working on another podcast with a friend. It's going to be about mental health and more about like why all the unintended consequences, but what did I learn because of those consequences? And one of those things being the crossover between nutrition and mental health, and how to stay out of depression, because depression can be a really it's a nefarious thing, because you don't notice it. And the canary in the mine for me is being tired and being frazzled and distracted and disconnected. The ADHD gets worse. And the canary for me is that I don't have any empathy or feeling about my children. That's the thing that I care about the most in the world. So if that is suddenly gone, if I'm sitting here at my desk going, whatever, who cares? That's when something's wrong for me.
Right.
And it took a long time to like come to grips with that being acceptable. And I could actually voice it, because other people have felt the same way too. It's not something that's wrong with my personality or my core integrity or who I am as a person. It's my physiology, my something's wrong. I'm not eating enough veggies.
Yeah.
I don't have enough fiber. So I'm not exercising enough.
It's interesting. Like I don't believe that I'm a neurotypical. Like I don't have the wiring of most, like if we were to sample the population, there's something a little different, right? And I think that, it's interesting you bring up a mental health podcast. I feel like I'd be a good guest on there too. And so I don't know if there's a correlation between, I don't know if passing the time for me is what some may consider a coping mechanism, or if it is a natural tendency. I guess
maybe not looking at it as a coping mechanism, because if you're coping, then that's not always. What's the difference between people who are thriving and people who are coping?
Right.
So if you like, for me, I felt like I've been thriving more throughout this time, where I wrote 30,000 words of a book and started a few projects, and writing another TED Talk, and started doing more virtual events, because a lot of the speaking events that I was doing and conferences were all canceled. I get to go to Dubai next month for the GISEC. It's like at the World Trade Center in Dubai, and it's going to be a huge event. And then I think I'll be in Riyadh.
That's awesome.
Riyadh in September for a at Hack event. And they made a comic book, type promotional material, and I'm in the panel with Bruce Schneier as like comic book characters. And that was like, it's him. It's like the legend himself.
That's way cool.
Busy. Yeah. I'm busy. I get to stay busy, and I get to have stuff I'm interested in. And it's like, I'm going to reorganize this, or I'm going to set this up. And we ordered stuff. We got our Christmas tree. We're going to get ready to set up with the kids and like do Legos and watch Harry Potter marathons. But then you get people who are just stuck. Like, what do you do to like, what passes the time for you when let's say you're done at work at 5:00 and you couldn't take your work home? What do you want to do? Like, what do you want to spend the evening doing?
I mean, typically, I want to spend the evening. I typically play some music. I played guitar since I was 14 years old. So I always have a guitar around. I've been trying to teach myself piano. So that, and then, I am guilty of the binge watching of X whatever. And so, and then I live in a really great neighborhood now. I just moved. So, being able to enjoy the walkability of LA again. I'm kind of in.
Where'd you move in LA?
I like Silver Lake, which is just east of East Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
So.
No, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Funny, I'm in a place in Washington right next to Silver Lake. Cool. Bizarre, really like within a mile or two. So it's really cool.
Nice. So yeah, but to be honest, like if I don't take my work home, right, if I'm not focused on something that's work related, typically I'm learning something I can reapply to work. And so, I'm not, Beethoven, so I'm not sitting up there playing my piano for hours upon hours. Um, I will go and clone a trending, Git repo on GitHub, and I will mess around with it. I love to learn new technologies. So yeah,
I might actually have to ping you. I've got to come up with some more hacking demos to do live hacking. I think the funny one was the zero logon vulnerability. And for those who don't know, it just came out as I think it was a Sev 10, and it's for domain controllers that you can, using the net logon protocol, send a bunch of zeros and change credentials, change passwords for domain. Like it's immediately a problem. And for anyone who's gotten onto a network, it's instant ownership of the domain and domain admin root creds. So if you haven't patched it, you are negligent, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And that demo is just it's so fast to be able to display. It's hard to do these things. So like for a keynote in Dubai, they want to see a hacking demo. Well, people ask, well, can you show us a 0 day? Be like, no.
No, but then it's not a 0 day. But, kind of. I mean,
well, yeah, but as soon as you tell people, that's when the clock starts ticking, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. There are some really interesting open source. I love to do reconnaissance. So when it comes to looking for vulnerabilities and large systems, I love gathering the necessary intel to find attack vectors. So I'm constantly polling GitHub for OSINT frameworks, especially automated ones. There's a really great one called Sniper from this guy, 0 Days. Is his name.
I love the names people pick. I didn't ever come up with a good one.
Yeah. Mine has always been PIDOF, which is a Linux command, process ID of PIDOF. Look me up. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, that has been when I get bored. I typically have 3 or 4 different what should I say networks that I like to look at.
What are they?
And on my LinkedIn, actually, I started to map out connections between telecom and the National Security Agency. And I used a framework or basically a program called Maltego.
Oh, yeah. I love Maltego.
Yeah. I think it's used by the FBI and a couple of, intel agencies. I find it fascinating.
They follow me on Twitter. I don't have an agreement with them, but I'd love enterprise version of their product to sample. Hint, Maltego.
It's so expensive. Yeah, Maltego. They're in Germany now. I was going to meet with them at RSA. When I was working at Space Force, I wanted to get an enterprise license to do kind of proactive offense, but that never materialized. So.
How long were you at Space Force? Or supporting them?
I was supporting Space Force for, I don't know, about 8 months. And then immediately transitioned to supporting the Air Force.
What can I ask about Space Force that wouldn't have problems? What's the publicly available stuff? How many people work there, or how big it is, or
the program that I work for, it was not large. I can tell you, I work kind of on the platform engineering side. And
was there a different vibe there? Were people stoked?
Yeah. Well, it was a different vibe because it was a different program. So the Department of Defense and the Department of the Air Force has set up what are called software factories.
Okay.
And these factories each kind of serve a section of the military. And the program that I supported was called Kobayashi Maru.
Star Trek, the Kobayashi
Star Trek.
Maru is the test.
Right.
It's the unpassable test.
There's another. Yeah, I didn't even know that until you just said it. So I always thought it was the guy who did hot dog eatings.
His name is Kobayashi. Yeah, he's the hot dog record holder.
Yeah. I could never replace Star Trek in my mind with that guy. Yeah, they served the Space Missile Command, SMC, I think. And like the way that these programs are set up is that you can have a bunch of civilians supporting it, and you don't have to give them the context of the actual mission, because what they're doing is not necessarily related to anything mission specific.
Right, like you could be writing code for a special type of clock that needed to be able to function,
right?
And it does. It's all the same normal functions, but they need a customized thing, and it happens to be going on a special spaceship that happens to be classified. They don't need to know any of the other crap. They're just building a clock.
Correct. And it's not until you have until you're building something that you're building a capability that doesn't exist, that you start to get into kind of more sensitive areas of information. And so with the Space Force, I never, I worked as an automation engineer, building a DevOps pipeline, and that team was basically 4 other capable engineers, and the rest of the platform team was probably another 10 engineers. So not very big. And yeah, it's very interesting. Like application teams, huge application teams, to go and build the applications that end up, going onto the air gap networks. But the people building the platform is confined to very small and kind of tactical little units.
What's interesting to me is from a public standpoint, there's definitely an image across, I guess what you'd see in the news is that the government is ineffectual and bad at running things. But what I know about the way that military operates and the software side, it's definitely one of the more impressive feats of engineering, with all of the moving pieces, with the air gap networks and the SIPR networks and NIPR, and the way that everything is designed. You don't see too many military breaches. Sure, there was the Office of Personnel Management, and there's been things here and there, but to their credit, I think the military is run as tightly as Amazon or Microsoft or Google in terms of not making silly mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like not making detrimental mistakes, absolutely. But what's very interesting, and where actually I was able to find my niche, is that need to improve and modernize. So the military had a lot of overhead because of a lack of modernization. Sure. SIPR networks, et cetera, right? You can only have so many physical computers, on an on-premise network before, how many networks can you build, basically? And you can make, you can architect a very secure zero trust network in the cloud, it's just overcoming this mental barrier to see that, oh, if I understand how encryption works and I understand how authorization and authentication works, then I can have my secure secret network in a cloud without having to hold on to my hard drives down here. And that's a very kind of rudimentary way of putting it, but there has been a need to modernize the way in which the military can deliver software capabilities at a more rapid pace. And so that's kind of where improvement right now in military software is going, is more rapid deployments, more rapid development, so that you can keep up with, adversaries, basically.
Yeah, if you used to just build a Jeep, you'd build it and you'd be done. It didn't need any software whatsoever, and you could come up with a new one, and then you didn't have a problem. But now you got to update all the software, and every time we get clever and we come up with a new firewall, we build in new security risks that we had no idea existed.
Right. And now if you want a spaceship that looks like the inside of a Tesla or a fighter plane, right? Those types of that type of software needs to be updated, and that type of software needs to be securely delivered.
Right. And it cannot be sending a guy with a thumb drive to plug it into the jet. You're like, hold on, I gotta wait for the software to reboot, like,
or even worse, blank or DVDs,
or a stack of floppies. You got a guy with a pallet of floppy disks, all in order.
Exactly. I mean, so, and then think about it. Like, you go and do that, and the guy who drove all the way there, who has his, physical media, finds out that there's a bug, and it crashes their system, and then, the feedback loop is just not practical. No. Not practical at all. So that is. That's really what DevSecOps, in the context of military software engineering, is hoping to solve for, is being able to deliver securely modernized software to the end warfighter in, a modern time frame, what people would consider acceptable,
and to do so without having all the inherent security risks. Impressive.
Correct. Yeah. So their task is actually much harder than, it's not harder than banks, because banks have the same, mentality, different problems, but any sort of secure industry in which data integrity is paramount. It actually is, that was never, the military's outsourced a lot of their engineering and software for, I don't know how many decades. So to kind of really rapidly in the last 5 years, take on an initiative to like modernize in that way, it's impressive. And yeah, they're doing kind of a, I hadn't thought about it in the context of time like that, but for the amount of time they put into this modernization to, their capability now is impressive.
That's good to hear. I mean, yeah, it's always good to hear. It's nice to, it's kind of a double-edged sword. The military and the DoD can't advertise all of their successes without compromising the element of surprise. Being able to say, hey, we did this, like we use this new software to protect our, secret stuff. Like, well, you can't do that. You can't always publicize all your successes. So then all we're left is all the negative stuff that you see or speculation.
Yeah.
It sucks, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know how many people are interested in DoD software development. There are a few outlets to be able to kind of keep up with, with, what's kind of current. And if anyone is interested, definitely just kind of keep track of the DevSecOps initiative. And that is basically an initiative out of the Air Force by a guy named Nick Shalon, who has, the dude's vision to bring modern software practices into the Air Force. I don't think
that's a hell of a bucket list item.
The guy. Oh man!
I want to cure world hunger. No, I want to bring proper, secure data management practices to the Air Force, and it's just a very specific passion.
Yeah, and and the funny thing is like he is not a traditional like military background guy. He's from France initially. He was born in France. I think he started a company when he was 15. And he's a guy who, the guy who built DNS with me says, there's no better way to get stuff done than to stick a guy at the top to break glass. And it's brilliant what he has led in DevSecOps. So, there's really great leadership right now that's paving the way for really innovative stuff. So
it definitely it's definitely interesting. What I remember, somebody a guy named Mike Reevey, he's the head of enterprise security over at EA, and he built Microsoft's threat center within the last 10 or 15 years. I think he was the guy, and he used to be in the Air Force, and he's a good friend of mine. And I was asking him about career advice at one point, and he goes, well, what do you like to do? Do you like to build stuff or break stuff? And that was a really interesting, the way he put that question. It was like a really good way of starting to determine, oh, okay. I do like breaking stuff, but I like building stuff and then putting it through QC or putting it through its processes. But then I like finding the problems, but I don't always want to fix them, because we're back to the original problem of it. Now it's an administrative task and it's repetitive. I want to be able to figure out how we can solve this problem and improve on the process to shortcut human interaction, the amount of tickets that need to get put in, because a majority of, I was at a job for 2 years. A majority of the problems that I saw were not technical challenges. It was getting the right people to answer the phone or agree to a meeting to get their input, to get their approval. And I'm having to get approval from people who are bored or, have personal life challenges and whatever. So I'm all these bottlenecks that have nothing to do with capability or my ability to go and do stuff. And when I'm an engineer or in that mode, I just want to build. I want to throw on a movie and just build and get a bunch of stuff done, or throw on some repetitive techno and just focus. Because if I'm not listening to headphones and music, I can't get anything done.
Oh man, you're one of the IRC networks that I consider pseudo family is Rect.network, which is live cyberpunk streaming music 24 hours a day. And that is that's go mode.
Well, I learned a little bit more about it. There was a study that was done that talks about how much stress will increase every time you're interrupted doing work. And it explains when my kids will come in and interrupt me, it's like physical stress and pain having to change gears and go back and forth when I was in a zone. And part of being a parent is being able to figure out how to not kill them when they keep bothering you. It's like, oh yeah, you didn't know any better. My son and daughter both have ADHD. So my son and daughter both have different versions of it. One's inattentive and the other one's driven by a motor, essentially. And he doesn't have an inner monologue. He cannot think thoughts without saying them. He's so adorable, but it's so funny because it's very unhelpful. He has to be by himself, otherwise no one gets anything done.
Yeah. You know, I've thought a lot about, how meetings for engineers is a terrible waste of velocity.
Yes.
Because if I've got, if I need to get this thing done and then I've got to go have a meeting about it in the middle of the day, then you can take what was going to be a 4-hour task and now stretch it over 2 days. Because you can't, there's just no replacing that mental.
I definitely
mode.
feel the same. Like if I have 12 hours of time available, which I never do, once or twice a month, my kids will go see their mom, and I'll have. And the first thing I choose to do is sleep for 12 hours, and then today to record podcasts. But if I have 12 hours of nothing to do, I might hit the gym for an hour, and then I want to work, and I want to work on a bunch of things all at the same time, get things moving. So I'm building a couple VMs. I'm trying out some new code. I'm tweaking something. I'm checking emails, and I'm doing 5 or 6 projects all at the same time because the RPM levels are high enough to keep my interest in all of them. But trying to do them one at a time or spaced out an hour a day, the likelihood of me accomplishing all that is zero. It's way more likely to do 12 hours and pack it all in than it is to try and take 12 hours and spread it over 12 days.
I love to see just the other day, one of my colleagues was like, "Did you build this VPC in our commercial account?" Called like I don't even remember what it was called, but basically I had half done an entire deployment of HashiCorp Vault on Kubernetes. Because I know that I'm going to be needing to do that. And so at the time I was super focused. Something must have distracted me and I had completely forgot about it and left it running in our AWS. So, I have little graveyards of those.
My whole life is little graveyards of projects like that I forgot about or got busy.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't put a price on that type of focus.
Once you're in the zone, oh my goodness, yeah.
Oh no. Cool. My bad.
Oh, you're good. I can hit
it. Cool. Once you're in the zone, speak of the devil, man. That phone rings and now I'm not in the zone.
It definitely goes back into the making a lot of mistakes in life, making a lot of mistakes in relationships caused me to go get therapy, caused me to go read books and self-improvement, learning more about all this stuff so that even with an incremental improvement of 1% a day, eventually it adds up, the compound interest of improvements.
Yeah, exactly. And all those little failures in my life, I think of everything is continual process improvement. I mean, unless you're just like a narcissist and refuse to accept the truth.
If a narcissist was actually a narcissist to the core, they would have no problem looking at their failures to try and improve them because the end result is a better you that you can be more narcissistic about.
That's actually an excellent point.
It definitely throws a monkey wrench into the whole well, I'm the best. Be like, well, what about yesterday? You were still the same person. You didn't improve. Everyone else improved. So on a percentage scale, you're less great. You just devalued yourself by not improving enough or not improving at all.
Yeah, if you were 100% better than everyone yesterday,
99% better, and yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you're gonna have to get better, man.
You're at a zero in self-awareness. How does that make you feel?
That's going to be on the mental health podcast.
Yeah, dude. I met a borderline, someone who confessed borderline narcissist, and watching them mid conversation, just turn on this switch of malevolence, was like, ooh, it was one of the scariest moments in my life where I wasn't afraid of my safety. It was like they turned on this switch and they went from being curious and interested and just having conversations to actually wanting to destroy something for their own amusement.
Well, like, how does someone in give me a little bit on that? How does that happen? Someone mid conversation comes to that realization and flips like
having a conversation over coffee and just talking about like life backgrounds and stuff. Friend of a friend talking about work stuff and like mentoring and like just not a dating scenario, but it was. So I'm giving my background on things in life in general. And they went the way that they asked questions about stuff. It's like, oh, so where are you from? Oh, you lived in Japan, or you did. Oh, that's interesting. That's neat. To trying to like not talk shit or like, because if you're ever like whatever with a friend talking about stuff, and your friend gives you a little bit of grief about something, like, oh, you're an idiot, ha ha. It's totally playful, and you can see the meaning, and you know what their intent is by the statements. You know where their heart is. Like,
right.
This was something different, and it was it was like so when you did this thing, like it caught me off guard that I've met a fair amount of narcissists or people who are self-involved, but this was something else. It was like actively trying to take control over somebody, I'm like 10 years older than this person. I'm like, what's going on here? And I was like, I gotta get going, and got out of the conversation and like just never went back. It was terrifying. It was like watching the Joker movie, which ended up giving me nightmares for like 2 or 3 days.
That was a creepy movie.
It was so realistic, and then all of a sudden he stabs a dude in the face. Like that's how it was. Like that's how it was in this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. Like whenever part of why, back to the whole like being at home and COVID and not really caring. I've always, whenever I've sensed, that type of, whenever I've sensed like kind of weird energy from people, it's been like my defense mechanism, and life, I guess, in general has taught me that I can get burned. So I just immediately, I'm like, okay, not interested. So it's cut my people to talk to down, but also, yeah, kept me from getting stabbed in the face.
It was definitely this moment of like asking to learn, then asking to try and come up with holes in the reasons that they are a person, and be like, so do you think you made those decisions because you're ultimately a piece of shit, or is it because you just have something physiologically wrong with you? Like for me, for example, I know I'm very, very intelligent, and that most people can't keep up. Do you feel like you can keep up with me, or is it just a learning disability that you have that makes you inferior to other people? Like that level of speed, watching them navigate these things, not trying to care about your feelings and actively trying to like make you feel bad about yourself. Like, and you can accept it. It's completely wrong, but it's close. It sounds right or whatever. And it's like, oh, you're like evil. Like,
yeah, those people exist. Yeah, I'm glad that I have not encountered. You're actually, that's ringing very close to home. So I have had to cut a few people out who have shown kind of evilness,
little tendencies,
in that way. It's so subtle too, actually. I mean, it's like, you actually do have to kind of actively track, how wrong what they're saying.
Because I definitely have maybe not naive, but I'm definitely more along the lines of like, believe people when they tell you things. And if they have an agenda or they're being nefarious, it doesn't really matter to me. Most of the time, people are good people. And so then trying to just take things at face value and show up and be, why I'm kind of creating this podcast is to it's not an agenda. And I've had people's input being like, oh, well, you should go this way, or you should go this way, or market it in this way. And like, well, I want a place where I can have conversations with interesting people within tech. And I love the Joe Rogan podcast and the way that the format is, and it's insightful and interesting. And he asks good questions, and he's not afraid to have conflicting views, whether he has Alex Jones or, President Obama. It doesn't matter. He wants to learn and have interesting people in conversations. And that's what I want it for me. I don't want it to be a sales pitch or something cringy,
right?
Like have a scripted conversation and like try and pack it down into a really short time frame where everything has to be curated. Ugh, like that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
The ADD, our ADHD wouldn't allow it. It just wouldn't work.
No, man. I don't know if I would even know how to properly answer like rapid fire preloaded questions.
If I, like a politician, if I were to summarize, I definitely want to give back. That's something that you mentioned that you wanted to give back into a community that's given us a lot. And I'm new to the security and tech world in terms of like, I'm 38. I got clean and sober in like 2013 and was in the tech scene in a pretty big way within about a year. I wrote a book and TED Talk and all that and the whole Secret Service thing. And which is why I didn't have like a handle. Like I didn't know what DEF CON was. Like all these things that just like, holy crap, like coming out of a drug and alcohol sort of wasted life. I want to find people who don't think that they are good enough or give back and help train the next generation, and find these kids who think, well, I don't have all these certs, or I don't have all that knowledge. I don't have all this, the advantages these other people have. And if there's anything that's different about our industry than other ones, is you don't have to be a 6 foot tall white guy to be a DevOps engineer. If anything, it's the most race, gender agnostic requirement industry. You can have neck tattoos. You can have hair or no hair, pink hair. You can be anything you want if you can do your job. No one gives an F.
Yeah. And you can, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, because I for basically until my early 20s, bombed everything I ever tried. I never understood where I fit into these frameworks, whether it be education. Couldn't finish college, didn't understand why I was there. Wasn't for me, moved on. And, I always continued to learn, but, that growing up with kind of these societal expectations to achieve certain things in order to be successful, always made me feel like, no matter what I did, I was never going to be, good, because I don't have, what everyone else has in order to be, quote, successful. And I have a neck tattoo, and I swear too much probably. And like it really is the most agnostic industry, security tech. And it's an industry in which, you can hide, you're not hiding, but you can sit behind a terminal and interact with another human being. And the only thing between your minds is a keyboard. And it doesn't matter if the person on the other end is 16 years old or
my 12-year-old types at 70 words a minute. And it's insane. But the other thing is like my youngest sister is transgender, and I was trying to explain it to somebody else. I was like, well, if you show up at work as Carl and then the next day you show up as Shirley, people are going to go, okay, Carl. And they're like, oh, no, it's Shirley now. I transitioned. All right, Shirley, how do you spell that? Is that with Shirley? Like, okay, fine, great. Like, how is this deployment or how's this project coming along? It's an immediate, like, because of what you said earlier, you don't feel you're neurotypical. There seems to be a greater acceptance of other societal deviations. So deviations from the norm of what you would consider khakis and, 1950s.
Right. Boat shoes.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember going to a party in the summer one time, and I walked into a Foot Locker and asked, I was like, hey, do you have any shoes that look like I own a boat? And the guy's like, yep. And ended up buying.
Yep, I know.
Lacoste. They were little Lacoste white shoes. It was perfect. But
yeah, like Southern Methodist University, outfit.
Oof, yeah, right.
It's brutal. But yeah, it's like, if you're, like you said, if you can do, what is required of, like, what the need is, if you can bring a value, it doesn't matter all these other mental inhibitors that keep people from recognizing, oh yeah, I can do that, and stepping up and doing it.
It really is the only membership requirement, and trying to explain it to somebody who I'd rather hire. Two people sit down and they've never done anything on a computer before, or barely anything. They know how to do their Facebook or whatever. You sit them down in the chairs, and the person I want to hire is the person going, all right, I don't know any of this stuff, but I can. Like, having a belief in yourself rather than, I've never done this, it's scary or whatever. It's like, what's scary? Like, you're not going to break it. So just go set up a Gmail account. And if that's too hard and you don't know how to do that already, you just type it into Google, how to set up a Gmail account. And there's 1,000 results of whole pages that people have built to walk you through something that's fairly easy. But there's also pages like that for really, really difficult, complex stuff. How to integrate your voice over IP thing with some off-the-wall Exchange server configuration. And there's pages for it. So how long do you need to craft a belief in yourself that you can actually do something, versus you'll never know all the stuff because people are coming up with new stuff all the time.
Yeah. I mean, like, I find, like, my perspective now is, man, I feel sorry for anyone who had to go get a computer science degree, to be a mid-level, Oracle employee, because the most advanced technology and the most innovative technology can't be taught in a 4-year,
and they really can't. They really can't teach you how to think either. And the people who, like the people in class who thought, like, I was ADHD undiagnosed. In high school, I was always contributing negatively because I was so bored, and I could pull off all of my projects at the last minute by pulling an all-nighter and get good grades, which ultimately doesn't help with good work habits. It makes for really shitty work habits, but it definitely is the proving ground for me to what I like to do and what I don't like to do. It helps me find and identify that stuff. So I know what I like. I know what I'm good at. I'm good at seeing things so the Google Maps thing with how to kind of screw stuff around, and I ended up wiretapping the Secret Service. I remember having that conversation with a guy in Vegas at my first DEF CON. We're at a mansion party. Some company rents out a mansion every year, and I'm sitting at a pool with this friend of mine, and he's telling me, he's like, I told him I don't feel like I belong, because everyone there is pedigreed everything. Like, these are some of the most certified guys in the world, famous in the industry, icons, whatever. And they're like, no. Like, you think like us. You're part of the club. And they're the most, these guys gave me so much hope in that there are people at the top who want to send the elevator back down and train people and give back and, like, help people and not be dicks. Like, I had to pull myself up on my own and I did this by myself. And, like, that's total bullshit. It doesn't. The anomalies like Mark Cuban, who he's a billionaire because he came up with this broadcast.com, and you put internet on the radio on the internet, or whatever the joke is. It's an anomaly. It's more likely to be Google, where you've got 8, 10, 15 guys who come together and build something, and they work together and elevate it. Anyone who doesn't want to give back and stuff, they're missing out. I feel sorry for them.
And people who look down on other people because of lack of don't have the insight to realize that every person has something better than, like I may be better at certain things, but whoever I'm talking to is better at things that I'm not. And so if there isn't like if you for instance, one of my colleagues really was not strong in Kubernetes, and he has a super strong networking background, like Cisco engineer. Like, who doesn't look at that and go, holy shit, that's an opportunity to learn? Like, yeah, like let's collaborate, like let's work, because there are opportunities to strengthen your own self by passing on your own knowledge. And yeah, like, it's interesting. I've heard you say that comment on "you think like us," because I do think that to be security minded in technology takes a very, very different type of thinking. That
you have to think like a criminal. Sometimes you have to think of all the angles.
Absolutely.
And if you're not willing to look at all the possibilities, like, okay, I have to pretend that I'm this company, and now I have to pretend like I'm trying to break into this company, and now I've got to think. I've got to break in via social engineering. I've got to break in via physical security, which is why, like, friends of mine got me into lock picking, and I've got lock picking sets, and I'm sitting around like playing with Rubik's cubes, and these are and they collect Enigma machines, and like some of the dorkiest in a good way, and these are like my heroes. These guys are awesome. Having to think of all those different possibilities means you're willing to look at all the information that's available, and it's a really honest way of looking at life. So when I'm faced with political stuff, to try and discern what's true and what's not, and I'm not just looking at it objectively, Trump or Biden, like being able to say, okay, you listed 10 of these things in this statement about one of the candidates. I need to now go verify every single one of those claims. And then you find out 9 and 10, everything you said at 1 through 8 were true and 9 and 10 aren't. So was that intentional, or were you trying to slip those things in to then include them in being true because all the other ones were true, and trying to discern and coming up with what's real and what's not? Same goes for yourself. If you can find your limitations and know what you're good at and what you're not good at. I know I'm not good at handling addictive. I have an addictive personality. I'm not good. Like, if I have a couple of drinks, it will escalate badly. I've been a homeless drug addict a couple of times in my life, and it obviously doesn't go well. Like, it's not, that's not the desired result. No one sets out to do that. But the fact that I'm able to get to the point here where now people are asking my opinion, I'm not greater or better, or like I was able to find my own limitations, come up with ways to work around them, and put energy into stuff that I am good at. And now it's actually turning into something. And the gift is not that I'm so much better than anyone or better than anyone. I'm probably worse than most. It's that if anything, you can do it too. And hopefully people don't want to be famous for the sake of being famous. Hopefully people want to be, like, my goal is to be useful. And therefore my definition of success is being the most useful to others as I possibly can. Whether that means having a conversation with somebody who saw me on the Dr. Oz show, for example. I did a story on a USB hacking, and I got 10 or 15 calls the next day. Hey, I think my wife's cheating on me. Almost all of them were about infidelity. And I spent time talking to as many of these people as I could. Hey, if you don't trust your wife and you need to break into her phone, it's not your phone because you pay the bill. It's her phone. It's not a community phone, therefore it's illegal. This stuff you can't ask people to do. It's illegal to hack into people's stuff. But maybe you should go get therapy, go talk to somebody, because you're not in a healthy place. This isn't a healthy marriage. And if you don't trust someone, you shouldn't be in a relationship with them. And I give a crap about you. I hope that you can find happiness, but this is not the way to go about it. Even if it wasn't illegal, I wouldn't help you, because this is not a life you want to be living. This is not a way you want to live.
It's not right. I mean, yeah, and it's funny. Like, I frequented the anonymous IRC ethos, and there are people in there who, most of it is genuine problem solving, which is awesome. But every once in a while you get someone who just wants, it's basically like a proposal for a hacker to hire situation. And they, it's like they're asking you to just do something that's wrong. Yeah. And that's that's not what
it's a very obvious analogy to the ends justify the means. Winning,
right?
I want to win at all costs, therefore I will do these things to then accomplish my goals. And what I do doesn't matter. The end result means I won.
Well, there's no winning in that, and at the end of the day, either.
How you play the game matters, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that for your perspective on I've had similar times in my life where I was, by my own standard, completely not successful, failing at life. And it was coming out of those times that, I was probably most honest with myself, learned about what not to do once again, and was able to improve. And having that really honest, having a really honest perspective on yourself helps you have an honest perspective on all things. And really, the more honest our perspectives can be, the better.
I can't remember who said it. It was like Einstein, or I got to look up the quote, but the measure of a person's character is the ability to look at themselves honestly, like face uncomfortable truths about yourself. So if you're not, the first step towards solving being an alcoholic, for example, is admitting you're an alcoholic. Like, and it's very, it's like, from a to-do list perspective, it's not a very challenging step to be able to check off that little box, go, I might be an alcoholic. Check. All right, cool. Now you can feel accomplished. You got step 1 done. All right, now move on to step 2. They're finding how to solve that problem, Googling it. Maybe there's people who've done this before. Oh, wow. There's whole organizations dedicated to helping people figure out how to get out of drugs and alcohol addiction. And they usually have 12 steps, and they usually meet in churches, and there's a whole bunch of willing people willing to help you. Same with how to install an Exchange server, or how to pen test this thing. So if you can find the thing you love to do, there's so many groups of people willing to walk you through it.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I can't think of many things you can't learn if you don't leverage the community of people who practice it. Whether it be, getting yourself clean and sober, or whether it's creating a home media server, leveraging the community of people there, just supporting.
Right. Even inventing SpaceX required you building on the shoulders of other people. So no one's coming up with a brand new idea that was all on their own, done completely within their own little island, and they had no contributing help from anywhere else. It's like, I'm pretty sure someone taught you how to tie your shoes. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure someone, taught you arithmetic.
Right.
Or, yeah. I mean, it's it's an interesting thing, and I don't see much. I don't see a lot of examples in which there's a concerted effort to draw attention to the community aspect of technology and its importance. It's a very open source mentality. So, I would encourage just anyone who is semi fascinated in, emerging technologies, to at least become friends with Google. Do not fear Google. It will answer quite a bit.
Correct. But always, as demonstrated in the why I got famous, take everything with a grain of salt. Don't trust everything you always get, especially on the internet, because there is a inherent benefit to those who figure out how to manipulate systems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But if you use DuckDuckGo if you have to, but
I mean,
I don't take all those crazy precautions that some people are really super passionate about. You're watching The Social Dilemma, and you get from a kid perspective, and like helping my kids make sure that they're not exposed to things too early. You get the other people who take that and they don't want any information being used about them to be tracked or possibly sold. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I still have Facebook because I want to share photos of my kids with people who live, like, it's a useful platform for what it was designed to be, but I don't get my news from there.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the assumption I don't always carry, is that most people can tell the difference between what's obviously like propaganda.
Are you going to go to your mechanic for investing advice? No.
Exactly.
but for some reason, we're going to Facebook to get the peanut gallery, the least qualified people's advice on things. So then, was it Socrates or Plato that was talking about there was an idea that democracy isn't always good, and that people who participate should be qualified in the thing that they're talking about. Oh my God! Like, it's why, like, that's, if it was obvious then, it should be obvious now. And then you go back and you want to talk to fundamentalist Christians about the benefits or the whole thing around mask wearing right now, and it's just this huge debate. Well, apparently, the guy who founded the Lutheran, Martin Luther, had a quote about how to respond to the pandemic, because there was I think it was the Black Plague, and he said, "I don't go to places I'm not needed, so I can best care for my fellow man and do what I can to help society as a whole." So there's all sorts of indications that we're getting worse, and we're listening to the loudest person in the room. And if you listen to the loudest person in the bar, you're probably listening to the drunkest person in the bar.
Excellent point. With the growth of connectivity and the evolution of connectivity, we're losing an ability to be more discerning. Not everything that pops up first is popping up first because it's correct.
Right.
It's playing to your prejudice.
If you have $1 million and you want to get to $1 billion, you can. But if you have 100 IQ, you'll never be 125. So the intellectual elite concept, or like, you'll never be. People think that because there are people with a higher IQ, therefore they're smarter than you, therefore they're better than you, and they feel that they're better than you. I personally might have an IQ of whatever. I don't think I'm better than anyone who's got a lower IQ than me, and I certainly don't think people who have a higher IQ are better than me by any means either. You have a level of responsibility to whatever you've been given, talent-wise or gift-wise.
Yeah.
But you can't ever jump up that ladder. So maybe there's this inherent, like, well, screw the smart people, they've been wrong before. Yeah, I mean, obviously Copernicus and Galileo think the Earth revolves around the sun. Kill him, kill him.
I mean, but you got to start thinking about, the shape of the earth at some point.
But then we've got flat earth societies, and they're all around the globe. I'm out. Like, that's the word.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I go back to GitHub.
Man, I can get lost there. There's so much cool stuff.
Yeah. I guess, like, I don't know what to say to people who want to allocate time to conversations that mean nothing. I always thought of, like, cocaine as a drug where, like, you basically do a line of coke and then you spend hours talking about, like, the least important shit.
It's a hell of a drug.
That's yeah, Rick James. But if there seems to be a lot of focus on driving worthless conversation, and not a ton of a concerted focus on driving meaningful conversation, and so that's when I throw my hands up.
There's definitely what's keeping me going through the pandemic is continuing to put my head down and work and try to accomplish stuff and fail or not have things always go the right way, but at least it gives me something. Okay, this is what I'm working on tomorrow. This is what I'm getting up and doing. And that's allowed me to put the podcast together and start working on sponsorships, and looking forward to some of the guests that are going to come on, potentially Secret Service agent, which is like,
that'll be an interesting.
I don't even know what I'm allowed to ask him. I'm going to have to, like, pre-call that. Like, my boss at my current job, which is Sciemptive, and they're a sponsor, but they don't have creative control. So I get to, like, this is just me putting this on for hobby, meet people, talk to friends, a way to catch up and have dialogue about stuff that we don't see anywhere else. Where else you get, like, Twitter is not the place to have long conversations. People try, but it sucks. Being able to have, I wish I could have my boss from Sciemptive, but he worked at the NSA for 35 years. What do you ask that guy on an interview that he can even ask?
Right.
Like, I just want to follow him around and, like, see what food he eats and doesn't eat, or, like, which airplane he won't fly on, or, like,
you're like, why don't you fly Delta?
Like, at a certain point, I don't even want to know. Like, once I had a TS clearance in the Marines, and I've been around a lot of really interesting people who end up working at the NSA or really secretive organizations. I was at the pinning ceremony in the Marine Corps when one of the guys got a medal for finding Saddam Hussein on the team that found him, and then met another linguist who helped translate messages, who rescued a family from the Philippines who were kidnapped, and they happened to be family friends of mine. And so, like, all these weird happenstance sort of things, it's I don't always want to know. Like, I didn't want to listen to all the calls that I wiretapped the Secret Service and had available to record. I was like, I proved the concept, I'm done. Like, please. Yep.
Forgive me.
And that worked out. It definitely worked out unexpectedly well. So, yeah, people want to know secrets. I don't always want to know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. The process to learn secrets alone is brutal. Get ready to answer for literally everything in your life.
It was helpful. I lived in Japan, but then they had to send people from the embassy to talk to my school and, like, my parents and State Department people and, like, CIA people.
My neighbors, like,
yeah. I mean, let me tell you about that little punk. He shit in my azaleas, like, whatever, like, everything you've ever done wrong, because they're not just going to go talk to the people that you put on the list. They're going to ask those people, who should I talk to? And then they're going to ask those people more. And, like, that's when you start getting into the second and third degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's a problem. I don't want him to talk to everybody.
Yeah. And I'm like, I have no idea what this person's going to say about me, but, go for it. You got to put your hands up and be like, all right, I accept my fate.
But I did have an interesting moment when they said, have you ever done any illegal drugs? I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, do you ever do mushrooms? Yeah. Well, you can't join the military if you've done mushrooms. Well, they weren't illegal in the country I did them. Oh, well, okay, that's fine then. Like, did I just find the best loophole ever? Like,
you probably did. Yeah, that. I mean, see, the responsibility of holding secrets is not worth. I don't know what people possibly could want to know. That's
like who is the second gunman on the grassy knoll? What happens when you know it? Then what? Then it's poison. Like then you can't tell people, and then you know stuff, and now I wouldn't want to know.
What happens when you learn the cider block of some secret network? Like what life accomplishment does that bring you?
Fame or glory. Like you might the people who have the eternal glory on the net are the MVPs who spend time helping other people, and they're the people that are never going to have a shortage of couches to sleep on if they're going through a rough time, or people who would give back because they've given so much. Like, sure, you might have been the guy who broke into Sony or cracked some firewall or however. What was the Matrix? It's like you're the one who cracked the federal D-base or whatever. Like whatever the notoriety is, it's not the same. It's not the same thing as living in the light.
Yeah, totally. The notoriety just means that you have to like hide in the shadows all the time. And been there, done that, and tell you that it's much better in the
what. One of the last questions, and I'll let you go, and we'll have you back on. I'm definitely gonna have you back on fairly regularly as your schedule allows. What keeps you up at night?
That's a good question.
Other than caffeine. What's scary? Like what could go really bad?
I guess there are a few things, like types of things that would keep me up. If I'm working on something really interesting, for me, so I have my own set of, mental things. And so seasonally I go through cycles. When I'm in a very creative cycle, I will be thinking about whatever I'm working on and its implementation. So I literally will not be able to shut my mind off to work. And that's very positive. So if I'm really fearful about something, typically it's something irrational, like something socially that I did that I think I'll get fired for. There's nothing really that scares the living shit out of me, though. I'm kind of at a place where, what is, and what will be.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's not very interesting. I'm not afraid of like nuclear war. I mean, if it happens, it happens.
If anything, I want to be closer to the ground zero.
Yeah, exactly. I've always said in the apocalypse, I hope I have a really good view, and how awesome, I'll be the generation that gets to witness the apocalypse.
Surviving the apocalypse would suck. Like,
exactly. Yeah, I don't want to be post-apocalypse, but yeah, not full of fear. So that's not what keeps me up at night. What typically would keep me up is something interesting. Thinking about DNS or how to get DISA or AWS to hand me a big block of IP.
Well, that definitely lends to the idea of encouraging people to develop people skills to be able to solve some of those political and bureaucratic issues. So having diplomacy skills and being able to identify what people want and need and how people can work together, rather than being more like the Jurassic Park Dennis Nedry, who's sitting at his computer and just sort of only worried about himself and finding ways to give a crap about they need this and this is how we can work together, and getting people all on the same page. So it's developing those soft skills isn't always easy, but it's worth it. So
absolutely,
it has been awesome. for the
man,
first episode of this podcast, I think it's perfect. And I look forward to having you on for future episodes and hearing more about what you're up to.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. Never thought anyone would ask me to be on a podcast. So
you're very welcome. No, it's a pleasure to have you. It's always good. I always love talking to you, man.
Yeah, dude. Right. You too.
Well, hey, enjoy the rest of your night and good luck next week. Congratulations on the big accomplishment with one of the nerdiest things that I guess you could hope to achieve, but something that's big with the mill space. It's no laughing or no small matter.